Okay, well, hello and welcome to this Innovation Forum webinar, where we'll be discussing climate smart crops and how research and development is driving change on farm. I'm Ian Welsh, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. Um, as the agriculture sector faces growing pressure to build more resilient systems, crop innovation and the search for climate smart crops continues to gather pace. From climate volatility to supply chain decarbonisation, the sector is increasingly looking to diversified climate smart crops that can deliver both environmental and commercial value. This webinar, in partnership with Cargill, will explore the potential of camelina, an oilseed crop advancing through research, innovation, and on-farm trial, as part of a broader push for crop diversification and low-carbon feedstocks. We have an excellent panel to help frame the discussion. We have Lyle DePau, Director for Crop Innovation at Cargill, Mitch Hunter, Co-Director of Forever Green Initiative, University of Minnesota, Anna Teeter, Novel Oilseeds Program Manager at Cargill, and Anna Schwigel, Vice President, Minnesota Farmers Union, and a farmer herself. Welcome to you all. And my thanks to Innovation Forum's Ellen Attia for bringing the panel together today. Now, I will turn to our panel shortly, but we do want to hear from you. So please be thinking about points and questions that you'd like me to put to our experts and write them in the Q&A box on your Zoom window. Please note your name and organisation when putting your question. Now, you can up-like others' questions by clicking the thumbs up, and the more likes, the greater the chances that I will put that question to the panel. We are recording the webinar, and we will share the recordings with everyone else everyone on the list and everyone who signed up in due course. Okay, let's go. Lyle, very nice to see you. When you set the scene for us a little bit about why camelina, but in particular, why crop innovation? What is crop innovation, and why does it matter?
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for organizing. Thank you for the invite, and thank you for the question. So really, it all starts with this. That agriculture is facing a number of challenges, pressures, whether it be climate volatility, supply chain decarbonization, the need for more resilient cropping systems. And for us in Cargill, crop innovation is really about developing new or improved crops or working on plants that could become crops that can deliver value across the food, the feed, and the fuel ecosystems, while also trying to improve those environmental outcomes. So we're investing in research, we're investing in breeding, we're investing in agronomy, we're investing in supply chain readiness to move some of these crops from pilot to scale. So really for us, crop innovation is really about how do we make some of these new concepts, these new ideas available to farmers in our supply chain.
Okay, then let's think a little bit about camelina. What is the Camelina Winter Project, and why is it relevant now?
Sure. So for us, the Winter Camelina project is really about the demand or the rising demand for renewable fuels, especially sustainable aviation fuel. So as we look forward towards 2040, we're anticipating, a doubling of demand. Feedstocks like used cooking oil, like tallow, even soybean oil, what we're seeing right now are relatively insufficient for being able to meet that demand. And that means that we need to bring new sources or new supplies of vegetable oil online. Now, agriculture in itself, if we're going to ask agriculture to do that, we need to find new low carbon ways or low carbon feedstocks that don't require new land or don't compete with that food acre. It's really important for us to be able to find these different concepts to bring it forward. When we look at winter camelina, it's a really interesting crop, particularly in the northern tier of the United States, where what we're seeing is we've got a winter hardy annual oil seed that can be planted in the fall, harvested in call it late spring, early summer. So it's growing in these shoulder seasons where we're not competing with, call it the main crop. So we plant in the fall, harvest in the spring, and we allow for another crop to be grown shortly thereafter. So we're using what's called a relay cropping system, where we're able to grow this extra crop, or what is it, 3 crops in 2 years. Now, this crop, winter camelina, it's able to produce high concentrations of vegetable oil, which we're able to extract and then turn into renewable fuels. And what we're seeing is the ability for these farmers in this project to be able to produce around 50% more vegetable oil and maintain the same amount of protein that they would normally grow. So it's a really interesting project with a lot of good economic benefits.
Okay, so perhaps delve a little bit more into the challenges that camelina is solving across the food, feed, and fuel systems that you mentioned.
Sorry, ask that again.
Sorry, I mean, let's delve into a little bit more deeply into the problems and the challenges that
Oh,
camelina is solving across as you said, the food, feed, fuel systems.
sure. So, like I said, camelina, it's growing between the main season crops. So we're adding production without competing with food acres. So we're not adding more land. So we're protecting our available food calories. We're providing this additional vegetable oil that can go into the renewable fuel space. So it's solving that problem or helping to. It's one of the solutions that can help solve the problem of renewable fuels. I don't think it's going to be able to solve all of it, but it's a part of the solution. And from the feed aspect, we're seeing a very high protein feed that can be directed into animal production. So again, as we think about production of poultry, as we think about production of ruminants, beef cattle, this is a feed or a byproduct that can go in and continue to support animal production. So again, it's solving a number of problems. It's being able to be directed to solve that fuel, but also comes with these other ancillary benefits to the marketplace as well.
Okay, so how does camelina align with Cargill's renewable fuel goals then, and fit in with the broader energy transition?
So what we're seeing is again back to the original point. It's all about trying to find more vegetable oil that can feed this renewable fuels demand. So from our perspective, it's being able to produce more vegetable oil per acre. It's being able to supply this vegetable oil at a reasonable cost in the supply chain, because that's really important that the oil is being delivered at a reasonable price to the downstream user. At the same time, it has to provide value to the farmer so that there's profitability all the way through the supply chain. We're seeing benefits in coming from this winter growth. So being able to plant in the fall, harvest in the spring, there are some indications that there's environmental benefits that are coming along with that, which again is really important to the direction that we want to go as Cargill. Um, and it's really about how do we again bring these feedstocks forward without competing with that food acre. And again, that's really been fundamental to the philosophy of this project.
Thank you. Thanks, Al. Thank you for setting the scene. Lots we can come back on there. Mitch, welcome. You were at the University of Minnesota and working on this project with Cargill. So, from your perspective, then, tell us a little bit about why camelina or how camelina is different from traditional cover crops.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Good to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. So, first, I'm going to flip it on its head because I want to emphasize that camelina, even though it's a crop, is actually has a lot of similar benefits to traditional cover crops. So, cover crops have been held up for a couple of decades or more as a gold standard of getting conservation outcomes that we want: soil health, water quality, potentially carbon sequestration, potentially biodiversity benefits, depending on how they're used. And camelina is a cash crop, but like those traditional cover crops, it grows over the winter. So it gives those same environmental benefits. The difference, the really important difference, is that it gives farmers something to sell at the end of the day. So I love traditional cover crops. I did my PhD on them. I would love to see them multiply across the landscape. And I'm also noticing that after decades of investment and a lot of conversation, the adoption rate is pretty small and growing pretty slowly, and not really getting to the point where it's going to move the needle on those environmental outcomes that we want. So we at the Forever Green Initiative at the University of Minnesota just have a different take on it. Let's keep the soil covered all year round. That's basically the core of our mission. Let's do it in a way where farmers have an economic incentive to plant that crop year after year because they get to sell something they harvest, and it becomes just part of their operation. You bake the conservation benefits right into their operation, into their crop rotation, rather than making it an add-on that happens as a result of a, government subsidy or a program or something special. We kind of want to make that normal. So that's the biggest difference between camelina and traditional cover crops.
Okay, so tell us a bit about the environmental benefits that camelina can provide.
Yeah, Lyle touched on them, but I'll add a little bit more detail with my scientist hat on. So a lot of work has been done, and I want to emphasize that I'm talking about winter camelina. The same species can be grown in the summertime and is widely grown in the summertime in Montana, Colorado, Spain. We recently learned that in Iran there's 20,000 hectares of spring camelina being grown, which is interesting news. So it's widely adapted, can be grown a lot of places. And wherever it's being grown, it's going to cover the soil. And it's typically being brought into a rotation when there isn't a crop already there. So that's really the fundamental difference. You're taking soil that's brown, that has nothing growing on it, turning it green. And so again and again, the research indicates that you can get some really significant improvements from that. So some hard numbers. Research has shown nitrate leaching reductions, 70, 80, up to 90%. So hugely significant reductions in nitrate leaching. And here in Minnesota, that is probably our core, most urgent water quality challenge in a state that loves water. Everybody in Minnesota loves our lakes and streams, and that's very motivating. So big, big difference on nitrate leaching. Maybe about a 50 to 70% reduction in erosion. So that's critical. It's soil particles, silt, that's a water pollutant on its own, and it carries phosphorus with it. So it's kind of a double whammy. So it's important savings. And also we want that soil to stay on our fields where it can grow crops and be productive. That's fundamental to soil health. So those are two really big ones. Another one that is pretty unique to camelina compared to most cover crops is the way that it flowers. You can kind of see in the background of this picture some flower buds about to open in the bottom right, at least bottom right for me. And camelina will be one of the earliest flowering crops on the landscape in the upper Midwest. You'll have giant fields of just full of yellow blooms. And when the rest of the landscape, we maybe have some early growth on some of our other crops. And even the native vegetation might be growing, but it's not flowering. So it's a huge buffet for pollinators that's coming out at a time when they don't have much to eat. So those are all great things. And those are the sort of things that the Forever Green Initiative got us excited about camelina. But then there's this other huge thing that is kind of this unexpected wind in our sail, which is that this crop, camelina, can produce jet fuel and renewable diesel and other fuel crops that emit half the emissions of our traditional petroleum, maybe a quarter of the emissions if we can dial everything in and get our yields up, and continue to bring forward better performing varieties. So we're potentially cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 75% compared to business as usual, flying planes, driving trucks, et cetera. So that's a massive benefit for the environment. And we're doing it all without driving indirect land use change, without driving deforestation around the globe by taking traditional ag feedstocks off of the market. So it checks a lot of boxes environmentally.
What sort of scale, though, is potentially available right now? I mean, the massive reductions are possible, but how far can it scale?
We think that camelina has huge scaling potential. So again, we focus our work on the upper Midwest. So if you draw a big line around kind of part of the Dakotas, down through Iowa, kind of like the northern Corn Belt region. And we did a pretty deep dive analysis looking at what are the rotations that we could get into now and what are the rotations that we could get into in the future. So camelina, for all of its potential glory, is still in the early stage. We have to emphasize that, right? We're still working on it. It's a beta technology that we've released into the world, and we're still trying to refine it and improve it and see if it's really going to take off on the growth curve that we all expect. So caveat there. One of those barriers right now is that we have good success growing this crop following spring wheat, winter wheat, even corn silage, but we have a hard time growing it after grain corn. I'll spare you the agronomic details for now, but that's a major factor that's potentially limiting our scale. So right now, if we just blanketed the landscape of where we grow small grains and corn silage, we can already do many millions of acres. We can already do easily 5 million acres across that broader upper Midwest. If we can get to the corn grain acres as well, then you can really start to multiply that and think about 20 or 30 million acres where you can do this across the broader upper Midwest. So that breaking through that barrier and making it possible to grow following grain corn is a major focus of ours in our agronomic research.
Why is or is in fact this using of winter cropping in the upper Midwest? Is it? It feels like it's a paradigm shift, is it?
Absolutely, yes. And I'd even go beyond Upper Midwest. So why is it a paradigm shift in the Upper Midwest? Well, you look out the window right now, it's covered in snow, it's very cold, and no surprise that farmers are not like jumping at the chance to grow crops at this time of the year. We're showing that it can be done if you get them established in the fall, or in some of our other crops that we work with, if you work with perennials, come back year after year. But surprisingly, it's not just isolated to our region. Even down in the kind of the deep South, or at least the mid South, Kentucky, Mississippi, those areas, they're also looking at adding crops over the winter. They also leave their soils with nothing growing on them for a large part of the year. They're looking at different species, but there's really this growing recognition that we have a huge missed opportunity. And it's not just for production, it's also for, like I said before, baking conservation into production. Soil was meant to be covered. Go out to nature. You're not going to find very much soil that doesn't have plants growing on it. Our agricultural system should be in line with that. And yet somehow, even where it doesn't get that cold, or it doesn't get cold for very long, we've developed agricultural systems that really just focus in the summer months. So it is a paradigm shift. I don't lay this blame at the feet of farmers. I think it's all of us. We haven't put a lot of tools on the table that have made it possible for farmers to do this. So we're doing that now with Cargill, with Farmers Union, with lots and lots of partners to try to bring camelina forward and make it a real option, a real tool. And then we're also in Forever Green working on 15 other crops that have, cover the board as far as being different types of plants, but have that same potential of driving this paradigm shift.
Okay, thanks very much, Mitch. Great time to bring in Anne from the Minnesota Farmers Union. Welcome. So, I mean, Anne, you are growing camelina. You've been growing it for a number of seasons, as I understand it. So, how does it fit into your rotation then? And what does the kind of calendar look like in practice? We've heard the theory. What does it look like in practice?
Sure. In practice, I like to always be maybe a little too contrarian and buck the theory. But no, I mean, something I love about being in agriculture and being in regenerative or sustainable agriculture is that there are lots of different pathways to get to kind of the way. And I think what works best on one farm doesn't always work best on other farms. And what we're doing on our farm is we plant our winter camelina. This will be our fourth year of planting or of raising camelina. And it's right outside this window, just north of the trees of my homestead. We're planting it following our soybean crop. So the soybeans come off in mid to late September. And then we are no-tilling, so we're not disturbing the soil anymore. We're no-tilling the camelina into it as a straight stand of camelina. And we are then going to harvest it. Well, overwinter. It comes up in the fall. It puts on a couple small leaves, but most of the growth actually is underground. It's setting down along taproot. It's holding soil. It's got a very fibrous root system. And it's holding that soil in place over the winter. I live and farm in west central Minnesota where the winds blow. We have long, difficult winters. And, our goal, at least on our operation, is trying to keep all of that topsoil in place. So in the spring, like Lyle and Mitch both said, it comes up fast. It comes up early, before I could get anything planted and established, right? The camelina is already in the ground and it's ready to go once the snow melts and we get a little bit of warmth from the sun. And it takes off, and it outcompetes other plants, potentially weeds on our operation. We don't have to. We will fertilize it in the spring, But then, we kind of let it be and come back and it will do its thing. It'll set a seed head, flower, set a seed head, and then we harvest it at the end of June, first week of July. So it's one of the earliest things we get done with planting season, and then we're kind of turning around and starting to think about harvesting that camelina crop, and getting it ready to go and ready to store here for our friends at Cargill. So
So,
it fits into that rotation well. And then our plan, we will do another heavy cover crop on that, getting ready for our corn crop. We're primarily row crop farmers. So we treat camelina as a rotation crop. So we raise corn and soybeans. Camelina fits in really well for us as a rotation crop where we're looking to lower our off-farm inputs, as producers.
so I've heard others already talk about this as a cash cover crop. So, from your perspective, then, how does it change the economics compared to standard cover crops?
Oh, it's a game changer for us. We've been planting cover crops since 2014 on our operation. And sometimes, we get some either government payment, or from a private program payment to cover some of the seed, to pay for some of the labor to get that planted and established because of the public good, the public service that planting cover crops provides. And we still do it. Um, we have a lot more cover crop acres that aren't camelina currently on the ground, because we know it's the right thing to do. It holds our soil in place in the winter. I think it sets us up for better, more resilient cash crops in the following year. But the camelina is different because there's something for me to harvest at the end. I generally terminate either through tillage or with chemicals my cover crops, or they terminate over the winter, depending on kind of what I've planted. And this is totally different in that, like, I get to have something to sell, and you'll hear farmers say, over and over again, talking to producers of like, when I talk to producers about camelina, they're like, well, what's the market? And that's always a producer's first question, is not necessarily how does it grow, what are, the ecosystem services. They care more that there is something to market afterwards. And the fact that we know that sustainable aviation fuel is a very hungry market. This is something that farmers can provide a product for. And that's something that, inherently I think we like a lot better than just something that you're paid to do because it's the right thing to do.
Okay, what surprised you then? I mean, you've been a number of seasons. I think you said you've been growing this. What are the kind of, yeah, I guess, the upsides that have surprised you most?
Well, I think it's that like early season competitiveness. For many years we were an organic farm, a conventional, and now we are a conventional farm. Um, but while we were organic and we had camelina in the fields, they were our cleanest fields. It is so competitive against weeds, noxious weeds, that even in our conventional system, it saves us herbicide passes. So not only are we, holding that soil in place, our land is our biggest resource, right? So we want to take care of it as much as we can. Um, we're not only holding that soil in place over our long winters and early spring rains, but we're also uh, saving money on herbicide and chemical passes, which is really critical now. Again, as I'm thinking about kind of that whole farm return on investment, what am I doing to reduce my off-farm inputs has become much more of the mindset shift for us on our operation.
Great. Well, I mean, it does sound like a no-brainer. However, I'm certain it's not.
It's
It's
not.
well,
There is, so like that's all, the good, the shiny part. There are for sure challenges. There are establishment challenges. And, we of course are seeing we are living the effects of climate change. We have more kind of erratic establishment windows for when we can get the camelina planted and get it going before we get hard frost, hard killing frosts that kind of ends the growing season. we've had we planted camelina into kind of dust and it never came up. That was a complete loss. So there's for sure risk there involved for farmers. And it's also like it's a new crop. There is a learning curve, right, for how you manage it. I think that's been something that I've been really I've been really pleased with the Forever Green initiative and our friends at Cargill of we're doing a lot of shared learning with the producers who are these kind of early adopters about best management practices, best post-harvest handling practices. I think I talk to Anna probably with Cargill probably monthly about how it's going. I send her pictures. Is this looking good? Is this not? I think that's a huge portion of helping flatten that learning curve for producers because it does come with risk.
Yeah, and you need a market, and that's a great time to bring in Anna from Cargill. But thanks very much, and we'll come back on so much of that. Loads of questions coming in. We'll do our very best to answer all of them, but we'll get to those very shortly. But Anna, I want to talk to you a bit about how you work with farmers and how you do market development. So, what are the biggest barriers to adoption of camelina right now?
Sure, that's an excellent question, and I think really complements what Anne was talking about. Today, corn, soy, wheat, we have a lot of infrastructure that we take for granted. It already exists. Everybody knows how to handle it, what to do with it. There is not a lot of missing gaps of information. With camelina, it's different. You have to figure out how to combine it. You have to figure out how to store it. It's an oil seed that you're storing in the summer. The agronomy, I mean, we work with a number of different types of rotations here in the upper Midwest, from potatoes to corn and soy to canning crops. And of course, all of those different things come with different challenges. That being said, I've already seen farmers rise to the occasion to start to figure these things out. And I'm really excited and hoping that the rest of the industry kind of steps in to help support that effort with us to make those things easier as we go along, to have the infrastructure that we have today. So yeah, those are really some of the big pieces that we see.
Okay, thank you. So, what are you doing then to help de-risk camelina for growers like Anne?
Sure. We recognize that the risk can't be all on the grower, or this would never succeed. And so Cargill, from our perspective, we're trying really, really hard to eliminate some of the financial risk from the producer and some of the market risk from the producer. So we're offering full production contracts, right? A grower, if they don't know where they're going to take it at the end of the day, there's no incentive to try it or plant it. So our goal is we will take everything that that producer grows and make sure that they get paid for that grain, number one. Number two, we're making sure that growers have access to good quality seed. So whether, we're working with seed partners or directing growers to the right places to make sure that they get the quality seed that they need. In addition to that, we have a minimum revenue guarantee, which acts kind of like a crop insurance for the short term. Today, federal crop insurance, after 3 years of production history, growers are eligible to utilize. But there's a 3-year gap in there that growers are really kind of left to fend for themselves. And so we're trying to offer at least a minimum revenue that growers can expect for this program to cover them in case things don't necessarily go the way they want it to. And that doesn't include some of the benefits from things we see from Forever Green and their eco program or other state dollars that might be able to support these growers as well. And then, of course, Ann touched on it as well, that we're trying really, really hard to make this grassroots, to get farmers to talk to each other, to do information sharing, because we're at the point that soy or canola was 70 years ago. We don't have the things that we take for granted, the tools that we normally use. And so growers are going to accelerate much faster than research can because they know what works on their farm. And so information sharing is incredibly important, and we try to leverage that for growers to work with.
Thank you. So, what about other markets then? I mean, we've talked about aviation fuels. What about
Yeah.
other markets and other market development? And also, what about the co-products or byproducts? What's left when aviation fuel, the bit that's used for that, has been extracted?
Sure. That's a really, really important piece, especially from our perspective. 65 to 70% of the product that comes out of a crush plant is camelina meal. So if 70% of your material has nowhere to go, that's a non-starter in terms of economics. And so we need to make sure that that meal has a home. Today it can be fed to broilers, layers, and beef cattle, and we're hoping to expand those opportunities as time goes on. But today those are the publicly acknowledged and safe routes for that meal to go into. When it comes to the oil, obviously the main demand and main excitement is around sustainable aviation fuel and renewable diesel. And those are incredibly important and stabilizing components of this market. We have to have those to drive a majority of the effort. But there's a lot of interest on the industrial and food market as well. Some folks have looked at camelina for supplements for livestock or pets. There's been some interest in camelina in terms of bioindustrial applications. And so we need all of these pieces to give the market stability and flexibility so that when we do run into bumps and lumps in the demand picture, that we have opportunities to continue to support our farmers so that we're not yo-yoing in and out of the market, because that is one of the best ways to kill expansion of a crop like this.
Thank you. Just a final thought then before we open to our questions. Then, what do you think that supply chain readiness looks like for scaling a new crop like camelina?
Sure. There's a lot of different pieces that need to go into this, and there's been some really interesting materials that have come out of the early days of this market readiness work that we've been doing. But I think the most important pieces are one, that growers know that there's somewhere to take their crop. And that may not always be just at Cargill's doorsteps in West Fargo, right? So their elevator or another crusher maybe needs to be in the space. That's incredibly important too for economic competitiveness. But the demand pull and policy pull are going to be really what drives a lot of the value and dollars and market readiness back into the space. And so those are the things that we really need to see for market readiness to continue to grow. But of course, the other things I touched on, like handling, agronomy, seed supply, all of those pieces are in development and growing as we work with this project.
Okay, great. Thank you. Right, let's turn to some audience questions. Thanks very much for those of you that have submitted them. We'll endeavour to get through as many as we possibly can. If any of the panel do want to provide some context or further context by typing an answer, I think please do go ahead. But we will push on and get through as many of the questions as we can. Our most liked question, with what up like, from Tim Hughes. I think your question has probably been addressed a little bit, but does anyone else have any thoughts on how challenges can be overcome in terms of the camelina production? He's suggesting things around yield potential, short production windows, planting technology, meal utilization, crop protectants, etc. Does anyone want to jump in with any further thoughts on that?
Maybe I'll start, and others may have complementary or opposing views. So in this project that we've been working on, we often use the phrase, "We're trying to build a village." And I think what the question just asked is, like, who are the other supporting actors, or who are the other supporting industries that are required to make this thing work? And I want to pick up what Anna said on, canola is a 75-year or a 70-year-old crop. Soybeans are an 80-year-old crop. Corn is a 100-year-old crop. These crops have had the benefit of being able to develop all of their supply chains, developing the use cases, developing the technologies that go in to support the farmer, the downstream processing technologies. It's already built. What we're doing in the Winter Camelina project is I'm not going to say stealing, but we're borrowing good ideas from other crops that have been grown both in North America and around the world. And we're trying to apply that knowledge to camelina to see what is working and quickly exclude what is not working. So as you think about your own business, or to the audience, as you think about your own business, as you think about the research that you're working on or the projects that you're working on, if you have technology that could benefit the supply chain that's creating this camelina, I mean, we're open. It really is about bringing the best ideas, the best technology, trying to accelerate this crop faster, because we can't wait 75 or 90 years to make it successful. We have to do this quickly. So we want to bring that technology in as fast as we can.
Thank you, Kyle. Question from Stephen. What does camelina extract from the soil that needs to be replaced? Anne, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. We fertilize our camelina very similar to the way that we fertilize a lower input crop like oats, another one of the small grain crops we raise. So we put on a balanced blend of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, very similar, kind of about 60 pounds of nitrogen. And I'll have probably Mitch and Anna correct me if I'm if I'm wrong there, but the we will fertilize it kind of similar to what one of those small grain crops.
Thank you.
Mm.
Mitch, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, not to correct Anne in any way, but I think it's a good question. We certainly can't just perpetually intensify without replacing some of those key crop nutrients. That being said, I think this is another part of the mindset shift. Sometimes when we tell people, "Oh, we're covering the fallow," the reaction is, "Well, fallow is good. Fallow helps soil regenerate. We need fallow to make our cropping systems strong." But I think that's kind of an outdated mindset. And I'll come back to the notion that soil is meant to be covered. So as long as it's an appropriate use, as long as you're not driving your tractor across a bare field when the soil is saturated and you're tearing things up, you could do it wrong. But if you do it right, just getting that soil covered with a vigorous growing plant, yes, it's removing some of those nutrients, but in our case, taking nitrate out of the soil is a big plus. We want that nitrate to be going up into soils or into plants, into crop products, rather than going down into our drinking water and our rivers and streams. And in the process, all of the carbon that's going down via the root system and via the residue is actually adding back to the soil. So we do need to fertilize it to get it to be productive, to get it to be a real crop. But I don't think it's an extractive process. I think that it's part of regenerating the soil.
Thank you. Tanya asks, are there any studies on the use of camelina in the dairy industry? Asking particularly, can it be used as a silage mix? Anna, any thoughts on that one?
Sure, I'm happy to cover some of it, and maybe Lyle wants to jump in here as well. Today, any of the research that has been done on camelina in dairy generally has been done on camelina cake. So if you look at the extraction process of camelina, you're going to take those seeds and you're going to screw press them into the oil and the cake, and that is your expeller pressed camelina. Now, what we do at West Fargo is we hexane extract that meal, meaning we pull all of the extra oil, which typically was about 15% from that expeller pressed, and extract the rest of that oil. So we're trying to be as efficient as possible moving it through the supply chain. From a research perspective, most of what folks are able to do is not hexane extract. They can only expeller express. And so the research that's been done at universities is all based on the cake meal that is produced in that system. And so there has been research done with dairy on that cake, and there has been some interesting results from that, but dairy cattle react questionably to high oil or high fat meal in their diets. We're really excited about lowering that oil content and seeing what we could possibly do with the hexane extracted meal. So I think there's a ton of opportunity to explore that further. Lyle, I don't know if you have anything else that you would like to add to that.
Yeah, I think Anna, you covered it really well. Animals that have a rumen do not respond well to high oil meal, and it's really difficult to get good results. I think it speaks to the development of the market. Certainly, this is not the first time that we've been asked the question around could camelina meal fit into a dairy ration. And it's interesting because when we look at the nutrient profile of camelina meal, it's very similar to what canola meal looks like. So it's a logical leap to suggest that camelina meal could go in. But the research work does need to be done. So it's a project. I mean, if you've got interest, if there's a path, these are expensive. So I mean, I think interested parties would likely have to band together to be able to fund something like this. But absolutely, we think there's market.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on. our questioner asks or points out a lot of emphasis on winter variety of camelina. Why not expand to both winter and spring? Do they carry the same benefits? So why are we only talking about winter? Who wants to talk about that one?
Maybe I can start with that. Oh, Anne, why don't you go ahead and then I'll follow up.
And brief responses. We've now got another 16 questions, so just brief
Fair
answers,
enough.
please.
No, a winter fits in because it's not displacing other crops for me. So it's growing when there would be nothing else growing on my operation.
And you're better off growing something else other than a spring variety of camelina in the spring. Fine. Okay, thank you. Right. Um, Differences between seed crushing process and equipment required between soybeans and camelina.
I can take this one.
Right. Yeah.
So the really quickly, really simply, soybeans have 20% oil. They're a hard seed. Camelina has 35 to 40% oil. It's a soft seed. Soybeans are really big, so they're about the size of your fingernail. Camelina seeds, you could probably fit 50, maybe 60 seeds in the same space. So it just takes a different style of processing. Camelina better suited to crush plants that can handle canola.
Great. Thank you very much. Heroically brief. Appreciate it. The next question. What's the biggest gap that you're seeing between regenerative ambition and the practical adoption of crops like camelina? So where does it all fit in with the kind of regen agri picture? Anne, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I could go there. I think it's the price. I think more farmers would be growing more crops, different crops, if it made sense economically on their farms. And I think that's where outfits like Forever Green Initiative has the real pragmatic approach to how do we scale adoption of alternative cropping systems, better regenerative practices. It's the price, but make it economically viable for me, and I would happily grow it. And that's the lesson I hear from farmers over and over and over again.
And that fits in so well with Lyle's point around, well, they don't have the 75, 100 years to develop all these processes. They need to do them really much faster than that.
Can I
Okay,
add one sentence? I want to add one sentence. I'm
sure,
going to
Mitch.
grab 2 seconds. So I think that the big difference is that we are not just tinkering around the edges. And that's my critique of a lot of the regen work. We're adding a practice or two, a couple of band-aids. We're not really changing the system. We need to be focused at the center of the system on the crops. And so this approach is putting the regenerative practice right in the middle of the system with a brand new crop. I think it's a world of difference.
Thanks very much. Okay, global prospects or potential for camelina. Mitch, I'll ask you to do this one, please. Has the crop been tested elsewhere? We have someone coming in from Uganda. We have someone coming in from Cambodia.
Yes. So, and I'll wrap in a different question too about why spring that was briefly addressed. The vast majority of the work on camelina globally has been on spring camelina. There's far more development of spring camelina than winter. We're focused on winter because that makes sense in our region. But like I mentioned before, I'm aware of spring camelina production happening in the Western United States where it's arid, in between cropping seasons of wheat. It's happening in Spain, I think, in a similar kind of arid small grain production system. It's happening in Iran. I don't know about Uganda or Cambodia. I don't see obvious reasons why it wouldn't work. I think it could, there's very, very good likelihood that it could work. But, it would be a matter of assembling a germplasm collection, bringing it to that location, testing it, seeing how it fits, what part of the growing season do you fit it in with, how does it fit in a rotation. So the genetic potential is there. It's going to be a short rotation crop that matures rapidly, that can probably find a fit. And in those more tropical environments, it's probably easier to find a fit because you're often doing multiple crops in a year. You've got a lot of growing season to work with. But the devil's in the details of exactly how it pans out in those different areas.
Thanks very much. Another question that has been given a few likes, and it's moving things, shows you how fast things move. Dave Robb asks, what does Cargill see as the next crop for exploration going beyond camelina for a winter crop that creates value? So camelina we talked about. What else are you looking at? Come on, Lyle.
Tell me your secrets. So let's keep it with oil seeds for right now. And I think what one of the things that's really important is that as we look at the renewable fuels market, it's big, it's massive, it's going to take a lot of different solutions, and that's what we're thinking about. So I heard spring camelina. Yes, we're thinking about that for the West. There's other crops that are being looked at in the Brassicaceae family. So high oil seed content. You've got winter canola. You've got carinata, winter carinata. The university is also working on winter pennycress, which has some really interesting attributes as well. It probably has a different production geography and a different life cycle. So there's a lot of other really interesting crops, oilseed crops that are out there that can feed this really growing market. So those are the kind of the family of crops that we're thinking about right now.
They were actually speaking on silent. I said somebody would. So biofuel feedstock. Obviously, we've been talking quite a lot about that today. What's been the research and data then on relative carbon intensity of using camelina compared to other traditional biofuel crops? Who'd like to answer that one? Mitch?
I'll take a crack at it. So the answer is a little bit that it depends. It depends if you're asking a European or an American regulator, at least, because there's different ways of counting these things. And a lot of that has to come down or comes down to the role of indirect land use change. So in the European or maybe more international approach that's well adopted in Europe, Corsia, they have winter camel or camelina in the mix with a pretty low carbon intensity. So round numbers, petroleum jet fuel is about 90, and then camelina is 30 or so, I believe, in that Corsia accounting. And that is because they give camelina a credit for producing all that meal. It's actually reducing land use change. It's reducing the need to grow soybeans to feed livestock, basically, in simple terms. And so that actually reduces the carbon intensity of fuel from camelina. In the United States, our regulatory system, the GREET model, looks at things differently, doesn't include that indirect land use change. And so compared to that starting point of around 90, the number is closer to 40 or 45 for a carbon intensity. So we're still at or below that 50% reduction that's really critical in the United States context, but we need to keep driving that lower. Now you compare that with some of the other species. Soybean oil tends to be lower in the US context. You're not fertilizing it, so that's a huge savings of emissions. But in the more international context, it's higher because we consider a significant indirect land use change penalty for the use of soybeans in fuel. So that's kind of why I say it depends on what lens you're bringing to it, how you're analyzing it. But bottom line is that camelina can be very competitive, we think. And this is not a market that's going to be fed by one new feedstock. This market will only be fed by a wide range of additional feedstocks. And so our push is this is the one that has the most broad positive externalities, all the good things that are flowing from it for the soil and the water. But it also has to catch up 70 or 80 years of crop development. So we really, really need to push on this one to make sure it's a meaningful part of the mix and not just a token.
Thanks very much. Question for you, Anne. I see you're typing an answer, but if you don't mind just answering it directly. So, what are the camelina establishment challenges that you're facing, in particular in your farm? You touched on them already. Cody, our questioner, asks it timing, moisture availability, planting methods. Where do the challenges lie?
My answer was going to be yes. It it can be all of those things. So like Lyle said, it's an incredibly small seed. You can fit about 50 of them on your thumbnail. And it requires having either a grass seed attachment to a drill or a small seeded attachment for whatever you're planting. So that is one thing. You don't want it too deep. Like everything else, it's got its special zone where it wants to be planted. And then initial fall moisture was a concern or has been a concern before, that we've had drought conditions up on the upper plains as we go through August and September to October. And it just needs a little bit of moisture. It doesn't need too much, which is nice to get established. And then making sure it's incredibly hardy. So the frost to date isn't as much of a concern. We've planted it in the second week of October and had success, which is generally after our first frost date. It's got about the same amount of hardiness as like a winter rye. So it just needs, it doesn't put up a whole lot of growth above the soil in the fall before it goes dormant. It's that below ground growth that we care about. That's kind of, those root systems are holding that soil in place.
Thanks, Anne. Anna, I wonder if you could address the question we got here from Esther, looking at or asking about this range of yields seeing in commercially grown camelina. Just gives a sense as to what that yield looks like.
Sure. It's a moving target, particularly because most of our growers are first-time growers. For our experienced growers, I think a target of about 1,000 pounds an acre, maybe a little bit more, in terms of economic viability on farm is a really, really great place to start. As we look at more traits and we're breeding these crops for different things, those targets might shift and move. An earlier maturing variety may have a little bit lower yield because you just have less days, but it has less impact on the following cash crop. Or maybe we have a little bit heavier of a yielding camelina yield, and it offsets the impact of the growing cash crop. And so there's kind of a give and take on those traits as we're breeding. But generally speaking, economically on farm, about 1,000 pounds an acre seems to be a really great place to start.
Thanks, Anna. A couple of questions we've got on traits and talking about genetic editing. Lyle, and perhaps you can answer this one. What are you doing in terms of the genetic editing of our camelina to improve yields, to make it better, and to work better for farmers like Anne?
So we'll start with clarification on genetic editing. So we are not using gene editing to advance the crop. We are using traditional breeding methodologies. So your standard practices. There's reasons why we choose to avoid, mostly due to regulatory. How do we send byproducts into other markets? So really important that we continue to keep markets open. In terms of the breeding strategy, so yes, we're working very closely with the University of Minnesota. We're doing a lot of the development work on some higher level germplasm. We're doing some development work on what the next traits need to be, working closely with their breeders. But it's really making this crop better for farmers. So back to, how do we get higher yields? How do we improve disease resistance? How do we decrease shatter loss? How do we make this crop just yield more the way the farmer is expecting it to yield? Mitch, anything to add?
No, we're using advanced genomics. We're reading the genome. We're developing genetic markers. We're looking at mutations that we've discovered to understand what agronomic benefits they can provide. But Lyle's correct that the advancement of the crop is happening through what's considered traditional breeding. I just want to tag on here that our base funding is state funding. We try to get federal grants when we can, but it gets spread pretty thin pretty fast. And so our partnership with Cargill on the breeding side has allowed us to 100x the pace of our breeding, to 100x the number of varieties that we're evaluating in a given year. And in plant breeding, there's a direct relationship between the number of varieties you look at and your progress towards better varieties. So that's been a huge benefit for us of partnering with Cargill. It's not just the throughput. There's a lot of thought partnership and technology and wisdom about the industry that's coming through, but that's a really easy way to encapsulate. Man, it's been really impactful to do this partnership.
Thanks very much. And there's a question, but I think you may be when you're actually answering as well, but just I thought it was quite an interesting one. When you're harvesting your camelina, can you harvest at the same time as you've got another crop growing? Can you do that? Is that possible?
Yeah, Ian, you have excellent timing. I just pushed send on my response, but yes, you can. It depends on your farm and your crop rotation. So on my farm, we'll plant a legume heavy cover crop to try and reduce our off-farm inputs for our corn crop the following year in 2027. Some of my farmer friends and many that are in the Cargill program are planting it following a small grain or corn silage, where they are still the same kind of establishment window, the same kind of calendar. They're planting it in the fall, and then they'll come back through and plant relay crop soybeans that same cropping year. So when the camelina comes off in June and July, the soybeans will already be in the ground and they'll be ready to take off for that same cropping season. And that's the system that I think our friends at Cargill are really supporting in the U of M.
Thanks, Anne. I'm trying to get through a few more questions before we get to the end, conscious of time though. So, quickly, Anna, potential for camelina in aquaculture.
In aquaculture,
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of places that could be interesting. The omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is really appealing on camelina, similar to flax. It's a little different, but it's similar. And so there may be some interest both in the meal and in the oil in use of supplementation for aquaculture. I also know that folks have been looking at algal oil versus camelina oil, and how those are used in the industry. So those are some of the areas that I see some overlap and some interest in this space, but it's all developing. We're all running 100 miles an hour here and trying to go as fast as we can.
Carbon sequestration. Is there any research into the potential for that, Mitch?
There has been some research on carbon sequestration, and I think there's positive indications, but we don't hang our hats on it for a couple of reasons. The biggest one is that the more rigorous carbon markets and even science-based targets, which those of you in the food and bev industry are very familiar with, I'm sure, don't really count it at this point. It's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions about permanency, and we also don't really need it to be able to tell a super strong carbon story. The GREET model doesn't include it, so if those benefits are there, it's a nice add-on, I think, to all of the other list of benefits that we're seeing. I don't know, Anna, if you're more familiar with any more recent research on that, but it's not something I track really closely because I think we have a story to tell that's even stronger without it.
Yeah, carbon can be tricky. And I think we have a lot of the other pieces that are necessary to make this work, both from a carbon intensity and a soil health perspective, that really uplifts this crop in a pretty unique way.
Um, I think final question before we come to the close. So, we had a couple of questions asking about how invasive camelina is, and also there's a question asking about volunteers the next year. Do you get problems with them appearing again, Anne?
I typed a response, but I said that in my experience, it's been very easy to control volunteer camelina, either through tillage or chemical herbicide. Both do great. It doesn't outcompete your next cash crop.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Did I hear someone coming in?
Yeah, I was going to say camelina doesn't have hard seed, so it may germinate the next season, but it's very, very easy to manage and it doesn't come back over and over.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious of time. We are coming towards the end. It's been brilliant open session there. Thanks very much for all your questions. I hope we got through most of them. And if not directly your question, we asked a question related to what you were asking. What I'd like the panel to do now really is just to think about what they want to see from the industry to work better together, to bring crops like camelina to market and make it work. It seems to work across so many different areas. It ticks a lot of boxes. So, why don't we start with you, Lyle?
So for me, I mean, the takeaway message is this is a great example of what we can do with inside of crop innovation. So Cargill started crop innovation. We're thinking about these plants. We're thinking about novel solutions. We're thinking about how do we approach innovation differently. And this is a great example of how we create kind of more value from the same acre. It strengthens farmer livelihoods. It's new low carbon feedstocks. It just creates a more resilient, lower carbon energy future. So for us, we're really excited about the work that we're doing. We're excited about our partnership with Mitch at the university. We're excited about our customers like Anne. I mean, it's just a really exciting program for us.
Thank you, Mitch.
I would just add on to that. So we're looking for more friends like Cargill. And we're actually launching a new program called the Continuous Living Cover Market Builders Program. I'm not going to dig into the details because we're about done here. But if you're interested in learning more about camelina or 15 other crops that are really at this leading edge with the same theory of change, let's get the soil covered all year round and make it pay for farmers, put some unique ingredients out there in the world. We want to do the same kind of both R&D collaboration and then also build a village around each of those crops. On camelina, the thing that I would, wish for if I had a genie in a bottle is feed feed industry players who highly value the environmental benefits, the low CI, et cetera, of that meal. I think that would be a massive unlock. The oil side is very strong. We need the feed side or the meal side to come online with a big demand pull. And then I think we've got, really flashing green lights to keep going.
Thanks very much. Anna, very briefly, please.
Sure. A couple of things. One, policy, 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 policy. If you have demand, the rest will follow. But for those of you in the audience, anywhere from the breeding and farm gate to Cargill stores, there's an opportunity for you to innovate here. So join the team.
Thanks so much. And final word to you, Anne.
I love having the last word. I would say that my wish would be more players in this room, more Cargills, more folks kind of helping develop this value chain. Because just to repeat Anna's thing is that the need is there across the value chain.
Thanks very much. Okay, I'm going to draw things to a close there. We've just gone over time. Many thanks indeed to our panel for their time and insight today, and to Cargill for supporting this webinar. I'm delighted actually that representative of Cargill will be joining Innovation Forum's Future of Food conference in Minneapolis in late May. Full details on the Innovation Forum website. We will be in touch with the webinar recordings in due course, and for you to share or listen again. There are also some really good links on the questions and the Q&A. We'll do our best to extract those and share them with you as well. And I do see that there's a Malaga, the International Camelina Conference in Malaga in July. If that's Malaga in Spain, I'm there. Sounds great fun. But for now, I really hope the past hour has been useful for you. I've been Ian Welsh. Thanks so much for joining us, and goodbye.